G'day listeners and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and today, guys, I've got back in the studio the big man, the big dog himself, Mr. Jimmy Ibrahim, mate. Welcome back.
G'day, Sammy. G'day, listeners. Always good to be back here. Sammy, I was a bit surprised. We upgraded to the nice studio for today's session. Any particular reason?
Mate, I thought being an investor app, and pretty much all investor apps that we do these days are in the studio. No, seriously, man. We do them all in the different studio.
Okay.
Well, it's this one, or the next door was Declan and Lillian. So yeah, man, it's cool, bro. I thought we'd just stay with the investor theme vibe. You know what I mean? So yeah, man, we're back in this studio today. But mate, I'm excited because we're diving into the next phase of my portfolio, which we haven't done, mate. We recorded the last one it was late 2023. It was dropped in January of last year, 2024. Yep. But I'd say it'd be like, say, 15 to 18 months since we recorded that one, because obviously we're recording this in late March, man. So, mate, I'm excited to jump into this thing. The next phase, I haven't even thought about it for ages. And I've had heaps of people hitting me up recently, going, hey, mate, when's the next investor app coming through? Is there going to be another one? Are you going to cover anything off? So, mate, we're back in the studio and knocking this one out. So.
Mate, I've loved your stories, and I listened in preparation for today, listened back to the 11 to 20. And it was
likewise.
It was an absolute cracker of an episode. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, folks, you do need to listen to it. Sammy wasn't too bad. I was hilarious. There was a heap of value, and there was some great tips from what you did. I was pissing myself through the whole
Me too, right? You got me with one of them very, very early on. I would recommend, if anyone hasn't listened to that episode yet, it's a good recap of what we did before it. And then obviously, the 11 to 20 and the journey that went before this one as well. So anyone that hasn't listened to it, it's about an hour and 15, 20 minutes, something like that, I think. But there's a lot of gold in that one. And it was a funny app too, man. Funny potty as well. So I think it's one of those ones that people should tune into before they dive deep into this one. Yeah. It'll really set the pace, set the tempo for this one moving forward.
And just to set the tone also, the first portfolio we did for you was 1 to 6?
1 to 2.
Oh, we did 1 to 2.
Yeah, because we did my backstory first and then the 1 to 2. And then we were like an hour and a half in and we're like, we got to kind of leave this thing.
That is right, because we thought, we'll punch out the first 10.
6, yeah.
And we only got through two properties.
Yeah. So we did the 1 to 2. And then, because I think we were thinking we're going to do them in 10 property hits, eh? Mate, 1 to 2, 3 to 6.
Yes.
Or 3 to 7, or 3 to 6, I think it was. And then it was a 6 to 11, because there was obviously a sale in there as well. 11 to 20. And the 1 to 2 was one of the first eps we ever did. Like that was way back in late 2022, man. So ages ago. Ages ago.
That's right.
So, mate, here we are. We're back. We're back for the next one.
Brace yourselves, folks, for this one, because when you look at the thing I love about this is the scale. And I don't even know where we're going to go from here, because when you think about it, I'm going to do a quick recap from where we're at from number 1 right up until 20. I'm going to give people a quick firepower through all of that.
Let's go.
But then from 20 to now, we're going to do 20 to 30, which you did in 12 months.
Yes.
And then literally your trajectory from 30 properties to now, by the time we're recording, we're sitting at what? 120?
What's that, sorry?
For you in terms of the current property.
Right now, 118 properties.
118. So it literally went from 30 to 118.
Yes.
So look at that trajectory. If people are visualizing that in the map, that is incredible.
And I think the crazy thing is, like, even in this year here, and if people they want the details around, I was tossing up which way to take this thing. Do we do it as an episode that could be released on School of Property, and then we trim it out and release one on Scouting Australia? But I think that the cleanest way for us to do this thing is just record this as a normal episode, and everything that came with the creative lending that I went through, and effectively how I built and scaled the portfolio out during this window. Man, it kind of this is what set me on the trajectory. When I figured out how to do it, this is when I unlocked the code. And it didn't have anything to do with income at this time, because I was in business for sub 12 months at this period of time when I went on this next trajectory. So I effectively had just unlocked the code. And that's obviously what we cover off in depth in School of Property, which we're not going to go in detail in today. No. But yeah, man, this is effectively how I unlocked it and kind of sent it to the next level.
All right, strap yourselves in, folks. We're going to do a quick recap.
Give us a rapid fire, mate.
Sammy Gordon.
Rapid fire.
It all started back in Wollongong, a nice 2-bedroom unit.
Yes.
The art of negotiation. Sammy got into his first deal. Then we did a development in the New South Wales Highlands. Then we went to Adelaide for a couple of deals.
Yes.
And then we did a couple in Brizzy, which rounded off the first 6. Then We went all the way to Mount Gambier for the bargain.
Gambier bargain.
You got to listen to that one. The negotiation from Sammy. It was daylight robbery that they're still talking about Sammy today. He's not welcome back, put it that way.
They've got the photos around town still to chase me out with pitchforks if I ever re-enter the other council.
They were. But before we did Mount Gambier bargain, just to set the tone, there was a bit of a challenging period in 2017, Sammy.
Yes.
There was a lot of changes in terms of soccer, special forces. You had a hip operation. Your idol, your buyer's agent, fleeced you.
Yes.
And so you were on a very low income, 70K per annum. So and APRA rules had changed, so you needed to pivot.
Yeah. And a big relationship sort of change at that time as well, long-term relationship ending. It was a big year, man. 2017 was a tumultuous year for sure.
It was a big year, but that Mount Gambier bargain, that was your first 4-pack, right? And I remember the feedback when I was listening to that podcast and people wrote in afterwards and said, why would you do a 4-pack, Sammy, when you could have just bought one really good deal? You bought it for, I think you secured it 364 from memory.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
they wanted
440
440
unit. Yeah.
That deal today, for people thinking, why would you ever do that? What do you reckon that would be worth?
Man, that deal would be worth in the high hundreds of thousands. Like it'd have to be 200, 250K a unit.
Per unit?
Yeah, so you'd be talking, and it's individually titled, so I could sell them off. 8 to $1 million. Yeah, I mean, the back one was a 3-bedder as well. And I've renovated them all now too. So yeah, realistically, probably looking at least kind of like that kind of 220 to 250 across the board there. So especially with the back one probably balancing it out. So probably would be going towards individually selling them off close to $1 million, on that thing as well. And the rents are like $250 a pop for the 2-bedders, and the back one's over $300. So you're over $1,000 a week rent, call it like a $1,050 to $1,100 a week rent on a 364 plus some minor renos that I did myself as well. So it might owe me $380, $390 all in. Worth probably circa $1 million rents for that. So man, you're talking like a massive yield, nearly 15% yield on that as well.
The big takeaway around then, because I wrote down some notes here, because you had to sell off Wollongong to keep moving.
Yes.
So that was a really important point that we gave people the tip on that. And this next phase is when you went all in, Sammy boy.
Yes.
You moved back to the farm here, decided to do a bit of travel. The sacrifices that you'd done for the first 7-8 years.
Yeah.
Then you segued, you were generating around 60K net passive income, rents were increasing, and you're unsure of what to do. This is when a bit of a life turn of your career changed. You weren't sure whether to be a builder or a real estate agent, but then in 2019, you started the BA business whilst you started investing.
Yeah. Probably the next hardest year of my life, if not equal hardest year of my life, would have been that year at 29. 2019, man, doing starting the business that year, not having any idea how to run a business, no experience in sales, pretty much did no deals for the whole of 2019 as a buyer. Literally did nothing until maybe December or something.
Yeah.
So I was almost like a full-time investor that year. So I was still working on the farm a bit. I was investing full-time that year as well, and then obviously trying to get this BA business off the ground as well.
Yeah. No one really, I mean, when I was listening to the podcast we did recently, one of the stories that you were telling was really poignant. And I remember you saying that business wasn't going that well, right? You were a bit flat. You were trying to save money, but you realized you weren't going all in.
Yes.
And you had that moment with Tara. You sat there for about 4 hours and you decided
Tara being my dog back then.
Your dog.
Yeah.
And that's when you decided this is the time to go all in. And that's when you really just burned the boats and thought, I'm going to make this work.
Yeah.
So the properties really from 12 to 20, just to do a quick recap on those, because you went back into Brizzy. I love some of the numbers that you went in here because you offered some ridiculous numbers in terms of your negotiation.
Yeah.
You bought back in Brisbane. Then you bought your first unit as well. And that's when you got your first client.
It was second unit. Yeah. My second unit. Yeah.
And then from deal 14 to 18, we did a 5-pack, 2-bed unit block.
Yep.
Did an absolute cracking stoinker of a deal there as well. And that sets us up. The last deal you did leading up to where we're at today was a duplex. I think you bought some dirt.
Yeah.
Your family went in on the deal. Your brother went on the deal, caused a bit of relationship issues. There was a bit of disagreements about money and so forth. So we're setting ourselves up. We're at 20 properties. Sammy boy, COVID's about to hit.
Almost. Didn't hit the 20.
That's right.
We landed on the 19 because I
right.
swapped from the duplex to the single key. So it was actually 19 deals at that point.
Because you weren't able to get lending for that. And one of the points, this is where Sammy boy really went all in, folks, because he wanted to settle, but the funding got cut.
Yes.
COVID had hit and you had to settle in cash.
Yes.
and roll the dice. So you went all in.
Yes.
And this is where the bull shark started. Shark money lending came in order to try and finish the deal, right?
Yeah.
And so you stuck the course. Things could have gone a very different way. But that year before COVID, you mentioned 2017 was a really poignant moment.
Yes.
Just once again, just to recap, 2019, setting the tone as to the challenges you faced during that year.
Yeah.
What was going on for you personally?
Oh, man, there was a lot going on, you know what I mean? Like, especially with deals, trying to put things together, even for myself, trying to sign clients on. But like I said before, I'd never come from a business background. Like, my parents ran a small farm. Like, that was the business, right? That was the extent of the experience. I'd never worked corporate. I literally was a laborer on that farm or a laborer on a building sites. So I never had any experience around it. So I was effectively self-taught, or at the time I literally wasn't even taught. I had to go through the school of hard knocks with it. And yeah, man, it was a very, very tough year. Like, that 2017 and 2019 were easily the two hardest years of my life. And yeah, man, and not that 2020 was much easier either. When COVID hit, you're halfway, the business starts doing okay, and then it falls off the face. But man, kind of moving forward and moving into this year that was 2020, which was when I settled on the deal I settled on that block of dirt just as COVID hit. It had kind of hit like a month. I was just about to settle on it when COVID hit. Everything went into lockdown. The business, was going backwards. A current affair. All these TV stations were saying the market was going to absolutely crash, tank by 40%. Man, it was a crazy time to be in the market. It was a very nervous time to be in the market. But man, I was lucky that because I decided when I decided to burn the boats, I also decided to completely give away the farm job. I had told him that year that was going to be my last year, and then I fully committed to it at the very end of 2019 because I knew I had to go all in on it. And I was lucky that I had a small number of clients that realized the opportunity that I was talking about in the marketplace at the time as well. And they've reaped some ridiculous rewards off some decisions that they made back then as well in terms of still buying. But it was so few and far between, man. But it was enough to probably prop me up and make me probably similar to what I was making on the farm the year before or the years before that. So it was enough to kind of, keep me living, keep me doing my thing while I was trying to do it. But what I realized, and this is probably where we're going to get into the next phase of this portfolio, was the people that needed to sell at the time, right, when all these news articles and everything came out, the people that needed to sell sold. And the people that didn't need to sell just took their properties off the market. Because if they didn't need to sell, well, I'm not going to take a haircut. I'll lease it back out, or we'll just stay here for now. And fear and serious change in the market brings to people don't want to do anything. They freeze, right? So if they need to sell, they sell. If they don't need to sell, well, you know what? I'm just gonna take a backward step. And I feel like the market's almost been like that ever since that moment. A lot of people with uncertainty just haven't taken things to market. They've sat on the sidelines. I'm not sure what's going to happen. It's just created a serious housing shortage in Australia as well, stock shortage too. So it was really interesting to watch, man. But what it created was a lot of opportunity around deals still being out there in the marketplace. And I got Nick Wilcox on. He's one of the first episodes I ever did as an investor story, maybe 3-6 months into when we first released this podcast. And I went into his story and pretty much how he built his portfolio and how he aggressively built his portfolio during that time frame as well. And man, it just kept me hungry for wanting to do deals, because the only people that were willing to do it were people with the big cojones that were willing to go out there and roll the dice in a time when no one else did. That creates serious opportunity when also the only people that are willing to sell are the people who really need to sell. So I just realized there was this opportunity. I could see the writing on the wall, especially in a place like Southeast Queensland, where a lot of migration was happening because they didn't have the same border restrictions as New South Wales or Victoria. Most of the country being in lockdown, heading into winter. Where do people want to go in winter as it is? They want to go to Queensland. But all of a sudden I'm in lockdown and can't do anything either for the foreseeable future. So we just started seeing this migrationary push hitting up there. And so I just kind of realized, man, it was a time to roll the dice and to go all in on this thing. And what I realized when speaking with my broker, I'm not going to go too much into the funding side and how I effectively did it, but when I got the shark money on settling the block of dirt, I realized what I needed to do, because the interest rate was ridiculously high as well, and build prices. I kind of got lucky in the window of if you were building a home, there was the builder's boost that came out by the government to stimulate the economy to keep it going. Now I transitioned away from the duplex and I was going to build a home, and I'd already got everything ready to go with the contract. And this is for property 19. And I got lucky because in that window, they brought it in to try and stimulate the economy to get people building at the same time, just before I signed a contract. We had to sign a contract in this certain window. And I had the contract, so I was ready to sign it. So I signed it probably a month into this thing coming in. I was hurrying him up to get it done, and it effectively made me eligible because it was for your own home, right?
Yeah.
And it made me eligible for this $25,000 grant. So which was really cool and really helpful at the time. And I started building this thing ASAP because I knew I needed to try and refinance to get my money away from the shark money, right? That was at 15%. And put it in perspective, everyone at this time was borrowing money at 3% at that time, right? The government cut the interest rates quickly to keep the economy buoyant. People were struggling. People were able to put loans on ice, for 6, 12-month periods with no recourse. They just added on to the back end. And yeah, man, government aggressively cut interest rates as well. But I knew I needed to get this build done ASAP to then refinance it back out and have it on a lower rate. Whether I lived in it or I rented it or whatever it was at the time, I knew that's what I needed to do. So pretty much what I did was I put a plan together, realizing that this build needed to be refied as quickly as possible, but also realizing the opportunity that was out there in the marketplace because of the several deals that I was sourcing for clients and almost the surplus of deals that I had of negotiating on heaps of things. And then let's say I negotiated on 100 deals and 5 deals came together and I had 3 clients. Well, there's 2 deals that $50,000 discounts that I didn't want to let go to waste.
And you didn't have the money to do them yourself.
At the time, I didn't. And that's when I'm I need to figure out how to do this. And that's when I started strategizing, getting super creative with my lending. Again, check out School of Property for the lessons around this thing. Anyone in School of Property, let us know. We'll send you the specific lessons that this is actually in direct relation to in terms of my period through here as well. And man, what I realized I needed to do everything I could to get equity out. And again, I didn't go to full shark money territory, but I went to some extremely the bottom of the barrel to get loans out. And I was with decent rates. I had some stuff locked in at 4%, and I was refinancing back out at 6% to release $500,000.
Just on that,
yeah.
Where do people when you talk about shark money? People are thinking Sammy's driven around to someone and knocked on a back door and gone down.
It's private lending.
Yeah. So how does someone get access to private lending? Is that through your normal broker channels?
It depends on the level of broker, but it's typically through a broker channel. It might just be through a different level, but it's private funding. I say shark money. There's something else called mezz funding, right, or mezz lending. For anyone in the development space, people may have gone through it before. If you've ever studied development, mezz lending, mezz funding is a very common thing in developing. And what it is it's mezz, right? It's mezzanine.
Temporary.
Yes. So it's to get something through. So you might have a 12 or a 24-month or 6-month contract at mezz funding, which typically is between 15 to 20%, right? But they only lend it out for 6, 12, 24 months. So they make a really nice fat margin and you typically have fees on top of it as well. But it's for a short period of time. And a lot of the time it's for developers to get the funding to finish a project to sell it.
Yes.
Okay. And that was effectively the position I was in, but I didn't want to sell it straight away. My intention wasn't to sell this home. It was to get the deal done and finished and then refinance it out and move on. And so that's where I went to get the build done.
Yes.
But then I went to other tiers of lending to get, because that's private lending, private money, shark money, mezz funding, whatever you want to call it. It's all those different things. And then this was, and people willing to take they've got a higher appetite for risk, but then they're getting paid, ridiculously well off the back of it as well. So that's just a different avenue of funding. But then what I needed to go down was what other avenue can I go down of different tiers of lending? Who's got the capability to help me with this side of things to extract as much as I can out so that I can go out there and buy these deals and aggressively accumulate at this time when I know there's crazy deals there. And I lost a couple where I I had these stonker deals like 50, 60 grand under and I didn't have clients for them and I couldn't buy them. And it drove me crazy. And so I was like, no, I have to make this work. And I was working closely with my broker. Thankfully, I had a really good broker at this time who I still use to this day.
Yeah.
And I had the conversations with her and I just pretty much said I need to do whatever I can. She's like, you won't like the rates. And I go, I don't care what the rates are. Just get me the money, because I knew opportunity cost, what I was making on the deal. If something's an extra, put this into perspective. And the properties I was buying were circa $300,000, right? Let's even say they were all $333,000, which 3 of those deals makes $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Which they weren't even that high, but you could be talking 3 to 4 deals here.
But it's the ease of numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. 3 deals at 333 grand's worth of loans, or 4 deals at 250 grand worth of loan, right? To get to $1 million worth of debt.
Yeah.
If instead of borrowing money at 3%, you're borrowing at 6%, you're paying an extra $30,000 for that debt, right?
Per year.
per annum, right? Or instead of at 4%, you're paying 60, you're paying extra 20 grand. But even if it was 30 grand difference, hell, even if it was 50 grand difference, but if it allowed me to buy one deal at 50 grand under, but let alone 3 or 4 deals that were like 50, 60 grand under, which these deals were in 2020, I just realized there was this opportunity here that I did not want to pass and that I wanted to really get actively involved in. And that's where this tranche of like, it's 11 deals here. We're going to run to 30 deals. And they were done in like a 6 to 9 month window of 11 deals during this time where I'd only ever done kind of like, all right, the year before actually I had done in an 18-month window, I'd bought circa, was eight or 9 properties from 11 to 19. But I'd never run, and one of those was a unit block 5-pack, right? So this is like, these are individual properties from property 20. So we've gone from 19 from property 20 to 30. So 11 deals in there, you know, from that perspective as well. So man, it was a big run and it was a ballsy move. But obviously, we run through the numbers, and it will show you how it's paid off.
If you weren't in the business, then do you think you would have seen the opportunity?
No. Being at the coalface was the game changer because I was negotiating on so many. Like I said, 100 deals, I might get 5 or 10 max, but I didn't have the clients for them.
Because when I listened back to the other podcast, you had done a lot of research on Brisbane.
Yes.
You were very bullish on Brisbane.
Yes.
So being in the market and being active on the coalface, it just gave you more conviction. And once you started doing some of these deals, you just thought, well, this is a no-brainer.
I was bullish on Brizzy as it was because there were 13, 14 years in the doldrums where it hadn't really done anything. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense. And then all of a sudden I was able to get properties for 20% cheaper than what they had been 6 months earlier. And I'm like, hang on, like this is crazy. Like I'm buying deals here for 100, 150 grand cheaper than people paid 13, 14 years ago. I'm like, this is a no-brainer, especially with what's happening. And I was getting feedback from agents that people were moving from the southern states up there as well. And there was like, oh, there's a bit of rental demand coming in, surprisingly. And I was like, oh, hang on, this is the writing on the wall. And then you start hearing it from everyone. And I'm like, okay, this is happening. So man, this is the roll of the dice, burn the boats, let's go all in on it. And that's what I did. I burnt like these rates that I had fixed at super low amounts. I had to pay some break costs, some exit fees, all the rest of it, opportunity costs of getting this cash out and getting it out there into the marketplace.
So capital was not an issue at this stage, right? Because you had 20 properties. It was more of a serviceability issue that you were encountering.
I had both.
You had both.
Because I used almost all my cash or a significant I probably had 100 grand left over, but I used almost all of it settling the block.
Okay, yep.
So this is where I had to like, it was a mix of like I had the issue on both sides, but I just had to find the solution.
Okay.
And put it in perspective, like when people are getting normal rates now at like 6 to 7%, right? And back then it was like 2 to 3%, and I was getting them at 6. It would be the equivalent to people getting rates at 6 to 7% now and getting them at like 10 to 11%.
Yeah.
That was the rate difference of what I was paying. But that's how bullish I was on the fact that this was going to work.
Now, you just glazed over that. But for people listening, just re-listen to that last 15 seconds, because we often have conversations with clients now that they're still a bit unsure of holding a slightly negatively geared property and they're getting 6, 7% interest rates. Sammy just said, in today's market, if you were getting 10, 11%, but the opportunity was there, would you actually take it? Like, ask yourself a serious question, because that's the difference between why you're in your position now and by you not making that decision and us not even being here, right? That's a ballsy move. And you can't get that unless you did the 20 properties before. Yeah. You paid the price before, you grafted. And we're talking, 8 years? No, more. 10 years?
Yeah, we're from 19 to, it was in 10 years, we went a full decade.
Yeah, so it was 10 years in the making to put yourself in that position to make that very important decision. Like, you think about it as a decision, but it was 10 years. Yeah. And people want to get results in 12 months. Come on.
You know something I just realized as well? Something we left out of the last one and I forgot to mention in this one. In this same window is when I won Investor of the Year. So it was at the end of 2019 going into 2020. I got the phone call in November, December 2019. And it was released in January 2020. And so obviously this is when things picked up in the business. I won this award, Australian Investor of the Year, blah, blah, blah. COVID hits in March and I'm like, and this is, man, where I was just like I've won this award. A lot of people submit for that award. Like thousands of people submit their portfolios for that award. I've won this award. I'm sitting in this net equity position. I'm sitting in this net passive income position. I'm like, what is the potential risk and downside here? Like, what is the biggest? And there was a lot, like playing this game. And if the market crashed the way they were saying it, I could have got decimated, right? But I just looked at it, the understanding I had, the logic I had around the areas I was entering, and what I knew from the coalface, and that's where I just made the decision. And that's why, like, when people ask us this side of things, or like what you just said then, I'm like, do you trust the team you're using? Do you trust your own ability if you're doing it yourself? Or if you don't, do you trust the team you're using that you're going to get a result? Because at the end of the day, if something's going to cost you $5 to $10 grand a year right now in holding costs, but it goes up by 50 or 80 or $100,000 a year, but even that, even 50 grand a year, it went up. But it cost you, let's even say worst case, 10 grand a year. You're still 5x in front, still a 500% return on the 10 grand that you're losing. But like, what if you're losing 5 grand and you make 50? That's a 10x, right? What if it does 100 grand? You know, what if you're making 20, 30 on the way in, and then the property does 10, 20% that year and you're up 100 grand on either the $5,000 or $10,000 negative cash flow? That's the way I look at everything. It's an opportunity cost. It's a velocity of money. What's it doing for you? What is this money in the marketplace doing for you today to give you the result? It's not fixating on the 5 grand or the 10 grand. Because I tell you right now, all the bread and butter deals that I buy right now too, they're all running at the same negative cash flow as everyone else out there in the marketplace. I just know I'm going to make 50 or 100 grand off each deal, every deal that I pick up. You know, so it's man, for me, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer because opportunity cost, and it's knowing. I just trust myself that implicitly now. Like, I look at my portfolio, and now to the point I'm at 118, and the last, like, other than probably of the last 50 properties that I've bought, other than probably, let's call it a dozen commercial deals, almost everything else has been bread and butters. Because I had, and we're going to run through a tranche of deals here that are, so many of these are cash flow deals, right? That I bought next up. But man, I realized that I had this imbalance of a lot of cash flow deals in my portfolio and those many bread and butters, which is what I always preach. And I realized the imbalance in my portfolio. So over the last like kind of 12 to 24 months, I've had a very strong focus on acquiring bread and butters in the correct growth locations until the last like 12 months of cutting my teeth on a lot of commercial deals as well. But like, man, I realized what I needed in there. And man, knowing full well that even with interest rates, they've been at that rate for the last period of time, right? But I know what I'm going to get out of those deals. So I know the value of having them in the portfolio and the utility and what they're actually going to give me on the back end, especially when I go through debt reduction or consolidating to buy the next level of commercial deal, et cetera, et cetera. So,
you know what's even more impressive, the more I think about it, Sammy, because a lot of clients coming into the business now have got so much support and so many layers of people. They've got this podcast.
Yes.
They got the monthly webinars. They got so much.
Dude, they got direct strategists as well.
And I don't want to labor the point for you, but when this happened around Investor of the Year, Young Investor of the Year, I remember you saying that you went in and told your dad, the first person you saw, and he just looked at you and he said, "No, you didn't."
Yeah. And then turned his back on me and walked away.
That conversation's over. So for you to have the conviction to make these decisions when your circle of influence was literally you, like who was around you?
No one. I didn't have anyone.
Man, I'm getting a little goosebump moment because I just think the capacity for you to make these decisions at that moment, let's not underestimate that. That is why, if anyone's listening and you're a client of APS, what Sammy just said there is exactly why you are backing the right horse. That is exactly why you're choosing APS. Because you got a guy who had no one in his corner, built 20 properties that had no right to build 20 properties, did it on a very low income, yet now is doubling down and going from 20 to 30 in 12 months, and he's got no one in his corner. He's been burnt for another buyer's agent. He's got his own conviction, and you're questioning whether or not this is the right team that you want to be part of. Come on. I mean, sorry to go on a little, but it blows my mind. And that is what I identified when I spoke to you.
Yeah.
It's like, this guy's already won.
Yeah.
The results are in, amigo. Yeah. What are you waiting for? Like, this is it. So, mate, I just wanted to labor that point because people are listening to this thinking, oh, yeah, but Sammy's done this. No. If you were in his shoes, COVID, business, not earning any money, putting yourself out there on a podcast, trying to tell your story, being vulnerable. I know you don't like sharing a lot about yourself. Your families, you've been fighting with your family. No one's in your corner.
I wasn't speaking to my family.
You weren't speaking to your family. Your dad just laughed at you because he thought, no, you didn't. You didn't win anything. Go back to the sheds. And here you are.
Some more bags, you dog.
Here you are about to take on so much lending.
Yeah.
This is where we're at, folks. This is where we're at now moving forward. So let's get into it.
Man, I love it. To go one step further from that, actually, there's 2 points I want to make here, right? And I remember I spoke about this when we listened back to the podcast, the last podcast, and I was trying to remember who had the quote around the lonely chapter, right? And I tried to remember, like when we did it like 18 months ago, and I couldn't remember who it was. And it was Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom, the podcast, and he was interviewing Alex Hormozi, who these days are like 2 guys that I follow very closely. Yeah. But I couldn't remember it back then, who it was. And man, Hormozi talks about the lonely chapter, right? And whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a property investor, whether you're an athlete, whatever it is, right? The whole point of the top 1% is breaking all this stuff down. But regardless of what you are, you get to a certain level where you leave the current group of friends or the current circle behind, but you haven't achieved enough yet that you're in the next circle. And it's the lonely chapter in the middle before you've proven yourself or you've found that next circle that can help you keep leveling up and moving to the next level. That's the lonely chapter, right? And that's what I was in. And man, like the growth that comes through that, and anyone's listening to this that's probably got themselves to a decent portfolio. Like if you're at 5, 6 plus properties, you've got a decent portfolio. You're in the top 1% of property investors in Australia. You probably know what I'm talking about because there's a really tough bit in the middle there where no one in your current circle you can talk to about it. And then you're not in that next circle yet. And what I love with Australian Property Scout and with Scouting Australia podcast, and with bloody School of Property and all the rest of it, is bringing people together to help them go through those levels and understand that they're not doing it by themselves. And we're surrounding ourselves with the right team. No one's had to go through all the bullshit I had to go through to try and find the right broker, the right accountant, the right BA, which wasn't even there. I don't believe anyone else is at that level. Whereas now they've got that ability in that circle. And that's what I'd say I'd like leverage on that, lean on that, because that's what we're here for. You know what I mean? And like that's that piece, man, which was so hard for me. And in all reality, man, like one person that I probably do owe a lot to during this window thinking about it is Morgs, man. Like that year of 2020, that year of like the business was fucked. Like it was fucked in 2019. It was fucked in 2020. But she was the only person that I had during that whole window. My whole family turned my back on me. And like the only person I had through that whole piece was Morgs. And she was my sounding board. She was probably my punching bag, verbally. And all the rest of the bullshit, emotional baggage that I would have had during that whole period. And man, it was a crazy, crazy period. And doing what I've done as an entrepreneur and as a property investor, again, I reiterate the yacht video party of last year of everyone saying you're parasites. I go through what I went through and then try and say anything to me. People carrying on that they don't have, they can't save enough for the first deposit. Motherfuckers, anyone can fucking do it. You go out there, you set your mind to it, you go through it. You're willing to go through the hardship, then say something to me. If you're not willing to go through all that, don't even say a fucking word because you're nothing in my eyes in reality to this, because that's a victim mentality and it will get you nowhere. And I'm so fortunate that I had her during that piece and during that period, because it was extremely lonely, even as it was with her. And it was extremely hard during that piece and during that period. And that's where I want to just tell people, like, that is extremely normal. Who can you speak to during that? If you don't have a partner, lean on APS, lean on the people that you're working with, lean on that network around that side, because the current people you're with probably can't relate to that side of things, and you may not be in that next circle yet, but realize that APS is your next circle. We're all active investors. We're all people that you can lean on from that front. And that's what you really need to like lean on, that, leverage that, help take you to the next level, pull you through that lonely chapter and get you to the next point where it feels natural. Because that's what I found. And now, man, I'll do 20, 30, 40 purchases in a year mixed between commercial and fucked renovations. Like I don't buy normal properties. I buy things that are tanked, gone. You know what I mean? Like the projects that like, and we're going to walk through a couple here that like ended up having to be knockdowns because they weren't salvageable. The things I wouldn't put onto a client because of the risk involved in it. That came through the absolute, crazy years that I had during those lonely chapters, and just like, man, bulletproof mindset. Like I can't get rocked now. You know what I mean? It's like anything comes through, I'm always trying to solve it. Whether it's something that we've done and we need to solve as a business and me as an individual, or something in the property portfolio. I mean, you take ownership. How do you fix something? You move forward. And yeah, man, I just wanted to kind of, pass on that little piece around that of how important that is, and how important it is to lean on the people that you do have around you, because you aren't alone. You aren't doing it by yourself, especially if you're with APS. And I think Scouting Australia podcast, man, we don't just hone on the rainbows and lollipops of how great investing is, man. Like we dig into like how hard this thing is, and the fact that you want to achieve something significant and in a decent time frame. You're not parking it. It's not cruisy. It's not easy. It is hard. But it's like, do you want a result? We say this on the Top 1% podcast. To get the results of the top 1%, you have to do the work that 99% of people won't do. That's the gap. That's the gap. Top 1% results, top 1% actions. You're not the 99%. If you want to be the 99%, you'll get the results of the herd. You want to get into the top 1%, be ready for these pieces and these periods, man, because it's all part of it. I didn't mean to go that far down that avenue, but the other thing that I want to throw in is that final piece. In my honest opinion, man, like everything that I learned and I went through during these phases, especially to the first 30, like everything that I learned and went through, man, and this is why, in my opinion, School of Property is so ridiculously valuable. I've had so many people that are seasoned investors going, man, this thing is nowhere near as expensive as it should be for the value that's in this thing of like what I can do with my portfolio. The value of School of Property and what it will teach you is effectively how I built this thing, especially during this phase of getting to the first 30 where I wasn't on a big income. I didn't make good money. I was starting from a very, very low position. But this ability to scale and looking for the opportunities, whether you're looking at the real deals or you're looking at the creative lending modules and all the rest of it, man, this is the nuts and bolts and the meat and potatoes that'll take you from either nothing or an average portfolio or wherever you might be to where you're trying to go. The juice that's in this thing, man, like we don't leave anything out. This is how to scale the portfolio. It's in that. And that's why we're talking about maybe we do two different potties. We do one and we chop it back for Scouting Australia. You don't need to. Listen to this, and then everything that I implemented to do this and to get to this level came from, comes from what is in that course, man, and what's broken down with it.
It blows my mind, Sammy boy, when we go on when I get on some of these calls and I'm talking to a client and they've got all these lofty goals and they want to do it in 10 or 15 years, and we start talking about, when you remember you get access to School of Property, and we talk about School of Property and they're like, oh, just not really sure. I'm like, are you serious? Like you just said you want to replace 200 grand passive in 10 years, but you're not prepared to invest this amount of money to get the tools.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the difference between being interested and being committed. You are kidding yourself. The law of exchange, we talk about this a lot. Your exchange was you did all the work. That's why when anyone has a crack at you about the success that you've achieved, they clearly don't understand the backstory.
Yeah.
They don't know what you've gone through. So you deserve all the accolades and you deserve all the toys and all that because you've earned the right. And if they listen to the first half of this podcast, they would realize that.
Yeah. And man, that's why like when people say that or like they've got that opinion of it, to be honest, man, I don't care if we don't work with them.
Yeah.
Because like
we don't want to work with them.
Exactly, man. I want to work with people that want to retire themselves. Man, you can't retire yourself by just go, oh yeah, I'll trial APS for a deal. Like, man, it's like go all in or don't come in. Like it's as simple as that. I honestly don't care. I don't need the money. This is what will move the needle and get you the result.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to do that, mate, I don't care. Don't worry about coming on board then. Go work with someone else. I don't give a fuck. But if you want to get on the stage, and that's what we want, man. We want people who come in that want to get on the stage in 2030 and retire. Or if they're coming in now and they don't got a 5-year window and they're starting from scratch, all right, maybe you're not going to hit it in 2030, but are you going to be there in 2032 or 3 or something like that? I think the answer will be yes.
Yeah.
And man, that's what excites me, man. That's what juices me up. And if people don't want to do it, they don't see the value in it, man. Like, you're not serious enough. It's as simple as that. Because I tell you, there's nothing else out there and no one else has that level of knowledge. And man, we're still putting things in there now, that are the next level and take things to the next piece and the next level and the different things that come in. It's all these different pieces that people behind the closed doors are the only ones that get it. Like we're not giving it to everyone else. I'm not seeing anyone else do it either. So, man, to me, it's a no-brainer. And that's why I'm so vehement, man. I'm so passionate about it because there's nothing else like this. Not even back when I was trying to do it especially, but even now, there's nothing like this. Quite simply because no one's done it the way I did it. No one grafted. They went through all these different pieces and they did it making bugger all or next to nothing, through this whole piece and learn all these pieces out, man. This is what's in there to unlock for yourself within your own portfolio.
The thing that just had a smirk on my face because we haven't even touched on one property yet. But the point is, if you take that point, right, we haven't touched on the property because the property is the end point. It's like the point of an arrow. Everything else that we're talking about was what you went through in order to make the decision.
Yeah.
That is the hardest part, the 6 inches between your ears. This is what's stopping so many people out there. If you're listening to this and you're making the excuses, as Sammy said before, you are in your own way. Buying the property part is easy if you're engaging an expert, but getting your headspace in the point to make the decision and the conviction is what's ultimately going to lead you to this.
Yeah,
and I can say that, Sammy, because you've bought me close to 20 properties APS, and I have negotiated on zero. None.
How much money do you reckon you've made off that?
$5 million. And if you said to me, go back and borrow heaps more money and buy every deal at market rate, not even get a discount, I would, if I could go back, I would have bought double. I would have paid overs what even market rate was, because I know what the outcome would have been today.
Yeah.
So for people listening, brace yourselves, because we're going to go through some of these numbers, but almost the deals, I don't want to be flippant, but they're almost insignificant in the sense that you need to get your headspace right, because you will never get to 5 or 10, let alone 20 or 30, if you are not getting your mindset right.
And if you're not willing to invest in what will actually give you the result, just remember, you don't look at what something costs. What is something going to make you, not what does it cost? What is something going to give you the power to do, not what it costs?
Every investor, Sammy, you say this the best, and we say this on every call. An investor always looks at, whenever they spend money, what is it going to make them, as you said? A non-investor, and most people's parents and all that, always think about when they spend money, what does it cost?
Yeah.
No, that costs too much. Hold on. But it's going to make you.
What is it going to make me?
100%. So anyway,
sure,
I love it. I love it that we've gone down this road, because there's just so many moments that I'm feeling fired up, and I can see you getting fired up. And if anyone thinks, who do you want on your team? If you're about to charge through the arc, like 100%. If you're about to break the line, do you want someone who's sitting in the back on their horse and just saying, no, you guys go first. I'll just wait back
I'm
here.
going to use AI to select this battle strategy.
What
about the variables? What about everything else that happens?
That's right.
Man?
You want someone who's leading from the front, who's getting their toes wet, getting dirty at the front line.
100%.
And that's what we're doing. So let's get into it.
Mate, let's do it, bro. Let's do it. Mate, I think we're gonna punch through these anyway. What I kind of like is I summarize, and I've never brought the laptop to the actual
serious, folks. He's serious.
Mate, we've got 11 deals to punch through, man, and I just want to break down effectively where they were, man, why we did them, the whole strategy behind it and everything as well, and just rip through them, man. Get some yields. I think what's going to be really cool, and the thing to take into account for everyone here, is some of these yields are absolutely off their head. And what they've got to remember is I bought a lot of these deals in 2020, late 2020 going into, or like 2020 going into early 2021. You'll see as well from a market selection perspective, like some of the timing around a lot of this as well. But even like you look at that window, it's like a kind of that 3 to 4 year window of rental growth that was able to come through, as well as obviously price growth that's come through on this side of things as well. I think it's very, very powerful to look at it from this. It would have been circa 4 years since I bought a lot of this sort of stuff as well. So I think it's prudent to remember that the value of time, and even like when we invest now, so often like I'm very wary of what something looks like it is on face value today, because so often what we see is obviously the value and the rental growth and everything. And you're obviously not banking on it purely for that. It's got to stack up in today's dollars. But the beautiful part of looking at so many of these deals that were bought 4 years ago is, man, there's plenty of deals here that were 7 to 8% yields that are now sitting at in the 12s and 13s and something near 14%, yields on that front. And that's just time having its effect and being in the correct location. That's why I'm so important. It's so important to me of making sure the location is correct, so you're getting the wins across the board.
Yeah, I love it.
So, mate, let's jump in, bro. Property number 20. First cab off the rank today. Man, I actually love this deal. This deal had sat on the market for ages. It was stale. It was right at the start of COVID. When I went through, I did my big equity release with my lower tier lenders. I effectively got myself out of war chest to be able to work with. I was paying through the nose for it. Tune into School of Property to see, the things that I obviously did in terms of being able to continue buying as well, not just that equity release. But this property had sat on the market for around about 6 months. So it was stale as it kind of was. It was stale as it came into COVID, couldn't sell. They needed to sell. And it was listed up in the high 300,000s. Now, what I realized and what I really wanted to do from the strategy of what I went into this next piece, I'd gotten the taste of cash flow out of my Mount Gambier bargains and my unit block deals that I did down there. But what I realized and what I thought at the time was that Mount Gambier wasn't going to perform from a growth side of things. So I was like, okay, well, it's great on paper because they're 10, 11% yields, but I need and I want the growth as well. So what I was doing was I was going through and acquiring aggressively. I couldn't build it this time, but I was acquiring cash flow sites. And so acquiring these cash flow sites, it enabled me to know I was getting know that I was obviously getting really good returns on the way in now, that I was pretty sure it was going to grow and give me a good result, but that I had a lever to pull down the track to actually have an accelerated cash flow play on that deal as well. So first deal, first cab off the rank, was an 888 square meter block in Slacks Creek, which is about 20. It was near the freeway, 20 odd minutes to, I'm pretty sure with no traffic, that property is actually 19 minutes to the Brisbane CBD. I paid 315 grand for it. It was listed in the high 300s. I think based on comparative market analysis, and it had been stale for a long time, I actually think it might have been listed up near 400, but I was pretty sure this thing was worth around about 350 grand. So it was around about 10% discount, around about probably $30,000, $35,000 below market value when I purchased this thing. It also had a mad yield on it. So it was already renting for like $500 a week. Or actually I think it was under rented, but I had a property manager that thought they could get $500, $520 a week for it at a $315 purchase price. I was like, okay, sweet. It's like a 7% yield straight off the bat. Future cash flow deal. I'll use it as bread and butter now.
And just to clarify for people, so when you're talking about cash flow in these particular deals, this is when you're buying a house on a decent sized block with the intention to put a granny flat out the back, another dwelling, to get 2 lots of rent for the one title. So we're not subdividing.
No.
We're just creating another dwelling.
And the beautiful part of this with cash flow deals, like I don't actually like to subdivide if I can avoid it for cash flow, because when you subdivide, you create 2 sets of council rates, 2 sets of water rates, 2 sets of full insurances, all this sort of stuff as well. And you create a higher net cost base. And the biggest issue with this, and this is why I like multiple income streams on single title with resi, or I like commercial, because we work it all off. You have to look at a net yield perspective, because so often in residential, you're getting this gross yield and your net yield is actually terrible when you pull out all your net costs, which are variables that you can't control, right? Like once they're there, they're done. But the idea of stacking multiple rentals on the same property, I absolutely love it, man. So this is around about the same time that I was sourcing stuff for you as well. I think you were coming in, or maybe you came in a couple of months after this in a bit of a later part of 2020.
And just on that point, for some people listening thinking, but hold on, Sammy, if you subdivided, then you could sell them off individually. But the intention behind having this asset was to never sell, because it is your cash flow deal.
Cash flow play.
The growth properties were the ones that you would sell.
Yes.
So just for people thinking, oh, hold on. No, there's an intention behind why we're doing this.
Yes.
2 lots of rent.
I also couldn't subdivide this thing. So it wasn't a subdividable site. It was subdividable. This is the thing. When they're subdividable, a lot of the time they're worth a lot more. So if this thing was subdividable, it wouldn't have been 315. It probably would have been 415. Because someone pays intrinsic value for that ability to subdivide, even if there's bugger all margin in it. Because people were subdividing making 30, 40, 50 grand on a deal. But if they did 10 of them in a year, they're making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. So people playing that game. But I was never going to do a deal to make 30, 40 grand. I made that on the way in.
Yeah.
Right. So, man, it was also in a time where a lot of stock was starting to clear. And this is like a few of these deals here that I did in Logan in particular, and in Brisbane, Southeast Queensland. This is where a lot of it was sort of coming in at that time, where it was in that transitionary period of people who needed to sell was selling, or like they were rejecting lowballs, and then going, no, I need to get this thing gone. And then people who didn't need to sell were taking them off the market and swapping them over for rent. So it was a really interesting time to be in the marketplace. Like I said, that deal at the time would have been worth. I'm going to run through what I did with each deal as well, just to give a bit of value to the clients too, to the listeners as well. But I ended up building. This is when you could build grannies for about 100 to 120 grand for a 2-bed, 60 square back in the day as well. I actually built on that one for 108 grand. That was a 2-bed, 1 bath, big long driveway at the back because it was a massive, nearly 900 square meter block. Man, and so all in, it cost me 423 grand this deal. Rent on it now, so 423 in. Rent on it now is $1,090 a week. So it's a 12.9% yield, pretty much a 13% yield. Value now would be circa around about that 1.05 to 1.1 mil. Equity gain about 677,000 today compared to obviously value back then.
Why would you buy in Logan, Sammy?
Mate, that's what everyone was saying to me at the time. It's all clients were saying to me.
Why would you buy in Logan?
Man, and this is why I want to run through these as well, just so it can give the value individually on each deal rather than going forward and jumping back. I want to kind of go through what I did on each of these deals.
I love it.
Man, that was number 20. Number 21 was in Crestmead. So a couple of suburbs over from Slacks. Nice spot. I like it. Again, this thing had been sitting on the market for quite a while. The agent was hard to work with. It was an old lady. She was very aggressive. I think she had a bit of
She was a match for you.
small woman syndrome, and she was aggressive, man. And I just I was working with her on a bunch of these different deals, and she ended up really liking me, and she was calling me and all the rest of it. And I ended up buying a couple other deals off her down the track as well. But this is the only one in this tranche of deals that we put together. Man, I paid $318 for this thing. It again was listed at $400. So you can imagine how that negotiation and that conversation went. But I just said to her, hey, listen, I bought a bigger deal over in Slacks, which is a better suburb. This is a high set 3x2. That was a low set 5x2. And I said, I paid $315 for this thing. In reality, it didn't have anything to do with this. They were completely different properties. But this was just under 800 square meter corner block as well. And the high set home was right up in the corner. So I paid $318 for this deal in the end. Again, I think realistically, this thing was probably worth, again, man, $340, $350, something like that. I was probably getting in around about a 10% under on it. But, and this is the other thing to note with these style of deals, with the ones that were really good cash flow plays. So again, a 5x2, massive yield. I could see what they were renting for. And really good granny potential on them as well with these big blocks. I was willing to not get as huge a discount. So some of these deals that were like just bread and butters on a 500 square meter block and the house fitted and everything, some of those deals I was getting like 50 to 60 grand under. But I had a lot of growth plays already in my portfolio, and I was kind of lacking. I wanted the growth, and I was confident the growth was going to come. But for me, I knew I needed a lever, because the idea was I wanted to acquire these over like 12 months, and then I was going to slowly build a granny on each one and get that cash flow churning in, because I could see what they were going to produce at the time. And obviously at the time they weren't, that previous deal wasn't renting for nearly $1,100 a week, but combined it still would have been at like 800. So it still would have been a 9% plus sort of yield as well. So that was cool, man. I haven't actually built on that one yet. I went through going to build granny. Logan City Council changed their policies around corner blocks, giving me the ability to actually subdivide that one because of the size of it. So I've held off on that thing, kind of keeping it more as a bread and butter / future development side as well. So it's going to be a bread and butter that I'll chop and build on it. I'm kind of going through the process of that right now. But even now, as it is, that thing, when I bought it, it was renting for $420 a week. So still up near a 6.5-7% yield. These days it rents for $560 a week. So 9.2% yield on purchase. Value now would be around about $800,000 because of obviously what you can do with it. Equity gain on that to date right now would be $480,000. But obviously I have levers that I can pull on that deal, that I'm going through the processes of at the moment to obviously be able to subdivide and build on that thing and probably make even more. Obviously make even more.
So the first two deals you bought on market, correct?
Yeah. This was a thing, man, of like people needed to sell or they didn't. So it was a stale thing.
But can you just, because I know we've spoken about this before, but for people listening and the whole, you buy off market because that's when you can get the best discounts, and people not really understanding. Just to re-emphasize, why were you buying on market? Because it was stale, it's been sitting there.
They were stale, sellers needed to sell, and they were entertaining offers. So it always depends on the market. If you're in a flat market, I prefer something on market than off. If you're in a flat or a dead market and something's been sitting on there for 3 months, 6 months, there's two things. Either the seller's fixated on a price that's unfeasible, or they may be getting, and even in that instance, they may be getting stressed. Both of those deals, the sellers were sitting there waiting for $400,000, 3-6 months earlier. COVID hits, change of scenario, actually need to sell. This is the only offer on the table. Bid of negotiations landing around here. So, man, and this is the thing. It's always got to be the specific market, and you've got to understand the specific market. If I look at 2024 as a buyer's agency with APS, almost all of 23, probably to mid 2024, we did about 90. We sat between 91 to 96% off market every single month. Second half of 2024, when we pivoted out of markets like Perth and were buying into other areas that we were newer in, up-and-coming markets, stale stock on the market, our off-market percentage dropped from 91 to 96 to around about the lowest month I think we ever did was in the high 70s. So still a lot off-market, but now we dropped to a point where we're doing like 20 to 25% for a couple of months there of on markets because of the stale stock that was there. So, man, it's always about understanding the market that you're in and where the best deals are, because the best deals aren't always off market.
Yeah, no, it's a very important point. Just for people listening, take note of that.
And for people
really important.
And for people who don't understand market value, and investors that don't understand market value, don't understand an area, something might look like great value, but if you don't actually understand the pockets of a suburb and the pockets of in the suburbs in a council and the pockets within that suburb and the street level as well, That's where you can make big mistakes and actually overpay for properties that you might think is actually at a discount, but it might actually be expensive for an average pocket, right? So understanding that really closely is really, really important. So, yeah, man, and that was the thing with these of understanding. It took a lot of time to like learn the market. I'd already been studying it. I was just throwing out a huge amount of offers and seeing what sort of stuck. But again, those deals were sitting there. The guys were wanting like 400 grand pre-COVID. COVID hits, buyers scatter. You know, and that's why my opinion at the time was they were maybe $350,000 roughly deals at the time. But 3 months earlier, they were probably high 300 grand. So it's, man, that's where I thought was good value. And I like those big blocks. I like those future levers, future reno potentially if I wanted to. And yeah, man, it's a great point to make though. And it's all about understanding the market that you're in and where the best opportunities are and understanding each individual opportunity.
Yeah, great. So we're at 21 now?
That's 21. 22, speaking of off market, this is where I was starting to build some pretty good relationships. This deal was a bit of a stonker. I honestly believe market val was around about 350K. Paid 295 for this thing from memory. Ended up getting it for I think about 290 post negotiations. All these deals are post like a bit of building and pest negotiations as well with all of them because during that time frame you kind of were able to knock a bit harder with how lenient they were. That was actually a cool one to do, this one, because I flew up and was up there for a few weeks there. It was kind of when the borders would open and close, and I got a little window where I was able to get up. And so I was renovating this house for a few weeks at the same time I was going around and finding other deals. So it was kind of a cool time to be there. In retrospect, I probably should have just stayed up there, gone and rented somewhere I didn't mind living and actually gone and stayed there like that. It would have been easier to do deals at that time. Remote during COVID was pretty tricky at that point in time.
So which suburb was this one?
This was in Kingston, which is right next to Slacks Creek, halfway between Slacks and Crestmead, pretty much. And yeah, man. So it was about 850 block from memory. Man, it had an old pool at the back, which I know a lot of people get turned off by. And I just looked at this thing and I just go, and it was kind of semi on its way out, but it wasn't even fiber. It was weird, this old pool. And I just knew I was going to pull it down when I finally built a granny on it. And yeah, man, I just kind of negotiated on the fact of, oh man, it's a pool. Like people don't like pools, blah, blah, blah. And I ended up just buying the thing myself and then putting the bulldozer through the bobcat through the pool when we finally built the granny on it anyway. But then 290 all in on that thing. In time, I did my granny on it as well. I did my renovation on it too. Granny, reno, everything all in. I was all in for around about 400,000, just over 400 grand. Rent on that these days, and these rents are a little bit light on. To be honest, kind of all my grannies in the portfolio on review in Queensland are all a little bit light on right now. $980 a week in rent on that in total for just over 400 grand all in. It's a 13% yield, and that deal would be worth around about $1 million now as well. With where it is, the size of the block, and the fact that those rents should be a little bit higher than what they are right now, especially on the granny. So, on that thing, you're probably circa around about 550 to 600K as an equity gain.
Great.
So pretty juicy on that front.
It's funny when you say it's a bit light on rent. A lot of people will be listening to this thinking, I would take that in every day of the week.
And what I love though is like gross, I think would be grossing around about 50, 55 grand. It should be more than that, right? So it should be about 50, 55 grand a year. But netting, it would be netting right now after all expenses if it was debt free at about 40 grand a pop. You got 5 of those deals, man. That's 200,000 a year.
It's interesting. It just jumped into my head because you always say, and if people are active listeners, they will always hear you say, you never want to be holding on to a low-yielding asset for the long term. So if you think about it, and people say, no, we'll hold on to it. I'm just going to buy this and I'll keep it. If it's making you 25 grand a year in rent, that's before all your expenses. Why would you be holding on to that for the long term? When you can look at deals like this and you're making somewhere between 40 and 50 grand, it makes sense. If you can hold on to 5 instead of 10 at 25 grand, that's a no-brainer. Never hold on to low yielding. That's why we have the strategy about the growth properties. They're there for a specific reason. You pay down debt, you sell.
And man, this is why blue chip doesn't make sense. Because like, let's say you have a blue chip property, and even at $1 million, right? And let's say you bought it for 500 and it got to $1 million, right? But it was renting for $700 a week, which is 35 grand a year gross. You're probably netting 25 grand a year, like we're talking about, if it was debt free. Why would you have that where like you could have done 2 of these deals and be netting more in that same time frame? Like you could have done 2 of the deals, paired it with this so it wouldn't even need to be blue chip at $1 million, but like you could, and then sell it off and then pay these things and own them outright and have 3x the income, right? So it's like it just doesn't make sense. Like the idea of like buying, or investing in blue chip and holding it forever, it just doesn't make sense, man, because of this exact piece of the net cash flows are not strong enough. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
The only thing you should be holding for the long term are strong net cash flow deals.
Yeah.
When growth properties are in there, man, let them do their thing, go through their cycles, sell them off, clear the low yielding debt, exactly to your point there, and then use the profits to either pay down debt on the high net yielding properties or move it on to do more deals.
All right, let's keep moving because I know we've got
cracking,
quite a few of these kind of deals.
We've got a few to chop through. And the avenue you'll see, guys, is very, very similar across the board here. I've transitioned to a very heavy positive cash flow play. And when I was working at the cash flows in almost all of these deals, even at time of purchase, with current interest rates on purchase, they were all like 15 to 20 grand a year net cash flow positive. At time of deal. And that was with 6 to 7% interest rates.
Yeah.
When everyone else was getting them for 2 to 3.
Yeah.
Now, by the time I came off, and like, it's not like they're now at 10 or 11 because I've refinanced them all back down to, I refinanced them, a lot of them, and actually fixed them post-COVID at like 3%.
Yeah, perfect.
For 3 years. So a lot of them are still sitting very, 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 very low. And that was at rents back then. Whereas rents now are obviously significantly higher. So that deal, like I said, $980 a week, circa 13% yield on that. Next deal, we're back into Slacks Creek. Now, at this point, I had sourced all 3 of those deals. The next one, the next deal in Slacks Creek, I actually, Morg sourced this one. There was an old agent connection that she had for a long time there. She sourced this one off market. This was an interesting one because there was a flood overlay on the back of the block. Not to a huge extent, but there was a flood overlay on the back of the block. But it was a really good deal. She sourced it for 330 grand. And my gut feel on this thing was that it was worth like high 300s, maybe even 400 grand. Even incomparable to other flood properties. But I have a thing of just like not wanting to really give clients flood affected deals. Yeah. And so I took this deal on. And the funny thing was the flood like comes up the back of the blocks. And when we had the massive floods in 2022, the flood waters came up over maybe a quarter of the rear of the block. But I've got the granny built out the back, and the granny's built on piers, right? And I said to the boys, I said, build to the max that we can build on this one, because the rear of this block is flood affected. And council had no issue with it because of where we built to. So when those big floods came through in 2022, it was sweet, man. They had water views. I actually charged them an extra $20 a week. No, not really, but it's but yeah, man, like it was sweet, man. So that was actually where I was testing a new granny design as well, and that did exceptionally well. I started designing my own granny flats at this time. I stopped using other people's floor plans and all the rest of it. And I started designing my own things to maximize rents, from that regard. Built the granny for pretty much the same money. So I purchased at 330. All in on the granny was granny and a bit of a spruce up on the house as well was all in, was around about 125. So all in on this deal was circa 450K. House rents for 600 a week. Granny rents for 480. Again, that granny is light on, but you can see with that configuration change compared to the others at 420 and 430, this thing at 480. So combined rents on that thing, 1080 a week. Again, should be over 1100, but 12.5% yield on total TDC, total development cost. What I did with a lot of these deals as well was once I completed the deals, man, I stripped the equity back out of them to almost to TDC, to total cost in. And the reason why I did that was because I effectively have put zero of my own money into this deal. The rest of the money that I hold on it is just purely debt. So, borrowed money on it. So I have no money into this deal. So my velocity of money in this thing is almost unlimited because I have none of my own actual capital in it. But I'm running at a 12.5% yield on debt and on total cost in, and the rest of the money was moved into other deals. But again, like I said, this was a little bit, all these deals, I wasn't building the grannies on them at the time. I was just working my way through the process. And I was excited about this at this point, and obviously putting some good deals together. That thing would be worth circa 1.1 mil. Slacks Creek, again, really good area, good house, really good, income on that with a renovated home and a near brand new granny out the back. So 650K equity circa on that one.
Okay, so you're 4 in so far.
Yeah, 23 deals. Yep.
Are we buying a lot of properties for clients as well? Is business really starting to ramp up?
This is still 2020, so it's not ramping super hard. It's still like finding opportunities like this, man. Like, yes, I am still doing some deals, but low numbers, man. Like in all reality, I have the board from 2020. I always keep my whiteboards of what I do each year. I was doing, in the first half of the year, I was kind of doing between 2 to 3 deals a month. And then by the end of the year, and just remember, my fees were extremely low back then.
For the business, right?
Yeah, 100%. And my fees were extremely low back then because I was obviously, only really like first year in the biz. And then by the end of the year, I was kind of sitting at 3 to 4 deals, sort of a month sort of thing. So still doing okay, but I also had employed Morgs at this point as well.
Yep.
So Morgs was in the business at this time frame too. So man, it was cool. Again, it wasn't like firing, it wasn't going crazy. I was probably doing, think of it a whole 2020, maybe 2 to 3 deals.
All right.
Sort of thing.
Let's keep punching through them.
Man, the important thing at this point, and something to take into the equation, is, again, I'm making a little bit more money than I was obviously back when I was working the job. So I was building up a little bit more of a deposit perspective from that side, which was rare for me. I never really had money. It was almost always from equity. And even still, a lot of it is very heavily equity sort of redriven and everything from that perspective. This was a point where I actually ran out of capital. So I ran out of capital at this point. This is also the time where I realized the value in Perth. So this is late 2020, mid to late 2020, where I was running out of capital. And I went over and got on the ground in Perth because I was like, this doesn't make sense how cheap this is for areas like Rockingham, Kwinana, Mandurah. Like I was looking at these areas going, this makes absolutely no sense that they're at this money right now at this point in the cycle. So, man, I got over there, got on the ground. The really cool thing, the thing that I was really lucky with, because I realized the incredible value over there at the time, if people want to know how well and how early we timed Perth, like put that into the calculators. That was proper bottom of cycle. No one else was there until like late 21. At this same time, man, I had the ability, and I got lucky in the essence of my builder at the time gave me a 6-month contract in terms of how long it was going to be. Because not that many builds were going through at the time and everything had died off, this huge tranche of builds came in after me. But I was like right at the front of signing contracts when no one else had really signed contracts for like 6 months. So they'd scaled hard and big of building this huge team, but I was right at the front of it. So they built my contract of 6 months. They built it in just over 3 months. So my contract at home, which I was expecting to be completed like, early to mid 2021, actually got finished at very late 2020. So I was able to effectively get the refinance done on that home in late 2020.
This is the property that you bought as your 19th property.
Yeah,
yes.
This is the build.
Yes, that you did with your family.
Yeah, man. So we smashed. I didn't do it with my family.
No, sorry.
I helped them buy some other blocks. They were doing their own thing.
Correct.
And the funny thing was, apparently I was the worst person in the world picking this builder that I went through and I built with as well. After a year of fucking around, my family ended up going back to the same builder and the same designs that I had given them and told them to build. A year before. And they built the same things. Lo and behold, I wasn't fucking my family over. I wasn't trying to fuck them over.
So you did know what you were doing?
Apparently so. Anyway, moving on. I also built a very, very similar sort of product in that time frame. Thankfully, it was finished. It was great. I got a rental appraisal.
Good timing.
Man, perfect. The build was nearly, maybe it was circa 300 grand. I actually can't remember exactly how much it was, thinking back now. It was probably circa 300 grand, high 200s from memory. Smashed out the landscaping. I got there with my old mate that I did the other build on back in the other builds that I'd done there as well. And man, we just got in there, we hooked in, and we smashed this thing out for like 3-4 weeks. I went down there, so I was working out of I think at the time, actually I can't even remember where I was. Actually,
You guys in Corrimal?
That's what I was about to say. I moved down to Corrimal with Morgs down to Wollongong, and so we're living out of there. So I would work like. I can't even remember what I was doing, but I was driving up there, and I remember I was working like 15-hour days on the weekends. I think Friday, Saturday, Sunday, getting all the landscaping done to get this refi done. And I remember because there was no reception there, and I was trying to do deals. I was on the phone, and it was hectic. I had to drive into town because Mossy it was this weird spot in Mossy, and yeah, man. Anyway, got it done. Got it dusted, and yeah, man, got the reval done, got the shark money refinanced off, and I'd done this 300 grand build. But they'd done the whole thing. They'd lent me the whole thing because the security they took was on the land. So it was like a 50% LVR doing the whole build. Plus, in that 12 months, people had moved out of Sydney because Wingecarribee was out of the Sydney basin and there was no lockdowns. So all of a sudden, now my property that I was thinking was 750 was now valued at 900,000 and running. And so I was able to get out my 300 grand plus about another 100 grand worth of equity on top. So all of a sudden, I had this huge hit of cash come out, and I was like, here we go. It was about 400 or 500 grand. I finally got cashed out at that point. And yeah, man, this is where I went to the next level. So in the essence of time and not wanting to kind of labor through and run through each deal, deal number 24, Waikiki, 800 square meter corner block, 4-bedroom, 1-bath, 280 grand. Go have a look at the values of what that would be now. That's 650 to 700,000.
How close to the beach?
5 minutes, less than 5 minutes.
280.
Corner block, 280. Built on it for 170, I think at the time. 70 square meter brick granny. Again, did a mad little floor plan thing. I designed this thing. It took me like 3-4 months to design exactly what I wanted to do with it. But by the time that was finished, $450K, almost on the nose, all in. It rents for $1,100 a week now. So again, a 12.5% yield. And I'd be, that would be 1.1 mil. It'd be worth, I'd have 650K equity. Again, all these deals, man, when I finished them, I extracted equity back up to TDC. So total development cost.
Yeah.
I put all of it back in there. So I had no debt left, no cash left in the deals. And just kept migrating and pushing it forward.
Just on that, sorry
Yes.
to hold you on that. Because back then, when you started doing those grannies in Perth, wasn't there a bit of pushback? Like people saying, what are you doing? This is not going to work here.
Well, for one, they were telling me on that. Now, the other thing with Perth and WA is you can build a 3-bedroom granny. And man, everyone was telling me it's too small, don't do it. And I designed this one granny that worked. And man, all my clients, the builder talked all of my clients out of doing it. And it was only this one design that worked. I tried all these other things. They just didn't come together. And then I said, no, I'm going to build it. And they tried to say, we're not going to build this because we think you're going to be that unhappy with it. I said, motherfucker, just build the home. You've talked everyone else out of it. Just do the build, right? Just do the build. Man, lo and behold, finish the build. I rent the granny, right? This is to put it into context how well I designed this thing. I rent the granny for $600 a week and the house rents for $550. The 4-bed, 1-bath house rents for $550 and it's a 150 square meter home. My 70 square meter granny rents for $600 a week.
Why?
Because I designed it well. Man, I sat there for 6 months designing this thing and trying everything. And I was super confident in it. They just weren't. And I had this feeling, man. And I remember I've got clients now, like Kaz Nami, who's been on the potty, man. He's actually a strategist at APS now. Man, he still pulls his hair out because he's like, I should have trusted you. You told me to do it.
He didn't do it.
Yeah, they talked him out of it. And I go, man, trust me on this thing, man. Trust me on this thing. And he didn't do it. He's spewing because like $150 a week difference.
Right, we say that one quote, sometimes the door is only big enough for you to walk through. Man, you can't bring everyone else through.
Sometimes you got to be the example, you know? Yeah, man. So anyway.
Okay, so we did that.
Yeah.
And that's when you realized Perth.
Yeah.
But even back then, I remember Jay saying when you started buying in Perth, even the real estate agents were starting to say, well hold on a second, you trying to steal my commission?
Yeah, they had
no idea what a buyer's agent was.
They didn't know what a BA was.
So when people are thinking, how do you pick markets? How do you know?
Yep.
You know you're early in a market.
Yep.
When a real estate agent doesn't know what
doesn't even know
doing.
what a BA does. Like that's man, we've had a few of those markets in the last 6 months with the same thing. 6 to 12 months, same thing.
The new markets.
They did know.
Wow.
Yeah,
there you go.
You wait to see some client wins at the end of this year, mate. Your own as well. Well, you are a client because you're an APS employee, you dog. Joking, I love you. All right, moving forward. Did another one, next suburb over. This thing was a cracker. In the essence of time, I'm not going to go through each individual deal, but I love this deal. It had a gold-plated toilet. It was mad.
Jeez, the golden throne.
Yes, the golden throne.
Have you sat on it?
Of course, I've done more than sit on it. There's people that might know a story. I can't remember if I've ever spoken about this with Jace, but there was a house that we bought. Actually, I think we might have spoken on the potty, and the real estate agent got the quotes mixed up. No, the builder got the quotes mixed up, and they sent through a $50,000 renovation budget repair job on this house, but he got it mixed up with another property that was a 20 grand reno. And we had it all agreed to, and I paid the deposit. Like we did the deal off the basis of this. And then during the settlement phase, he came back and he goes, I got these quotes wrong. And yours was supposed to be the 20 and this was the 50. And to be honest, man, like I was scraping at this time doing deals, and I bought the deal and negotiated based on this 50. Anyway, long story short, I negotiated with a $50,000 quote.
Bonus. Right?
Yeah, it is what it is. Like, unfortunately, it's business, right? Sometimes. And yeah, man. So I negotiated hell out of this deal, had it fully renovated, paid $230, 20 grand reno, 3 minutes to the beach, 4-bed, 2-bath, double garage. Crazy. That deal would be worth $850 now just on its own.
Jeez. We're talking 2020.
This is early 2021. This one was early 2021. But I built a granny on that thing. I tossed up whether to keep it as a bread and butter or just sell it. But the granny on this thing, man, again, like, combine a rental side of things. I'm at a 13% yield on it. I got $700,000 equity from when I did the deal. Great spot, really good rental. All the rest of it, really good site. Set the site out really well. So happy with that. Like that was a cracker deal, man. I was really happy with that. And that was where I was starting to get in on Perth, but everyone was still saying Perth's a mining town, don't touch Perth. So it was a nerve-wracking time. I didn't have the confidence I do now to select an area and just go all in. But I was still buying there. But yeah, man, that's deal number 25 in Warnbro, right next to Waikiki. If anyone want to go have a look, beachside Warnbro. Says Warnbro Sound Ave runs down the middle. There's non-beachside, there's beachside. Go have a look at what a 4x2 is worth in that area. At 250 grand fully renovated for that thing, like that would be an $800,000 home.
That is crazy.
Yeah, so big shout out to Big JT, off market. We got lucky on the reno side of things, and again, man, a deal that with the building and pest report that came out and the quote that came back, there was a lot of risk in that deal, and I wouldn't have given that deal to a client, man. Like there was a lot of risk, and then it turned out that the quote was wrong, it was incorrect, and sometimes you get lucky on these things too, man. So,
but a lot of people listening to this, Sammy, I know we're going through this, but they're thinking, Sammy, it's a no-brainer. You paid 250, 280, 300, but you're seeing that in the lens of today. To have the conviction to make those decisions back then, right? Because everyone had the chance to buy that exact same property, but didn't. So don't glaze over that, folks. When you're listening to this, treat it in the circumstances that it was in at that time.
Mate, that first deal in WA, that was the first deal we ever did in WA. So I didn't offer that to a client, so I bought that myself. But almost all of these deals, I offered to a client and they rejected. Almost all of these deals. Offered to a client, rejected. Not the one I just ran through because we thought the building and pest was no good. Not the flood affected one. Not the first one in WA because of obvious reasons. But so many of these deals, man, like the next deal I'm about to run through was offered to a client. The one after was a complete shitbox. But yeah, man, like this is a thing, man. Like so many of the deals that I've actually bought were offered to clients. They didn't want to take them on.
They didn't have the conviction, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah. Or like, it was like, especially when we first entered WA, man, there was all that chatter. I think now we've got the presence and we've got the people trust us because of the results we've got on the board. And the other cool thing is, man, more than 50, at the moment, like 50% of all deals that we do are repeat clients. They're literally returning clients. So, man, these guys that got in and, maybe rejected us for the first 6 months on Perth, now they just go, mate, I'll buy in bloody Timbuktu if you tell me to buy there. You know what I mean? They'll buy wherever.
Well,
so
I'm a classic example. If you said we're buying here, I go, okay, send me the contract.
I might stitch you up with a Timbuktu deal.
You probably would.
I probably will.
You probably would. So anyway, we're at 25, are we now?
That is deal number 25, yes.
Yep.
Next deal, we pivot back to Queensland. Ooh. Now, this was a deal that I actually had rejected twice by clients as a cash flow deal. I really like this deal, man. I really like this deal. It was pretty good. It needed a bit of work, a bit of a renovation. But this is when the market had just started to kick a little bit as well. So I already knew it was starting to go. It was in a suburb called Waterford West, which if anyone knows Southeast Queensland or they know even Logan, there's this it's Marsden State High School, which is on the border of Waterford West and Marsden. It's a really big sporting high school in Southeast Queensland.
Yep.
Waterford West, the road that this property is on is literally on the same road as what that high school is on. So it sits in the catchment basin, very, very in demand from a rental perspective. And that's something we like to take into account, especially when we're doing cash flow deals. This thing will always be in demand. So yeah, man, I ended up paying $375K for this deal. Haven't built a granny on it. Have still got the chance to do it. When I went to build a granny on this thing, which was about a year or two later, the price had just gone through like a big price jump where like I was doing a lot of these grannies in the low 100s in Queensland and went through a big price jump. And I think like I felt a bit off and I was like, I hesitated because I was still buying other stuff as well. This is probably like 12 to 24 months after I bought it. And then when I hesitated again and I realized, I was like, I went back and I go, oh boys, maybe I'll do it. And I go, man, we've just like, We've already had another two prices because this is during that really rapid build price increase run as well. So, but to recap on that one, man, it's paid $375 for it. It rents for $625. It's a good deal. It's a good home. It's a good like actual bread and butter. Even if I just keep it as a bread and butter longer term and sell it, it sits at just under a 9% yield. Again, for bread and butter, pretty strong. Like that's today's rents. Be worth a little over $800K. So it'd be a 420, 450K up sort of on purchase price.
Did you go to Perth initially because you just wanted to hedge against being overly exposed to Brisbane, or was it just because of the opportunity?
Okay. And almost all clients wanted Brisbane. So I was like, okay, well, if this is a new area and everyone wants Brizzy, I was trying to give all clients into Brisbane. And then if something was a good deal, I'd go, all right, James Ibrahim, client one, Pluto, Swahili, client 2, and then Sam Gordon, client 3.
Yep.
Or I'd send through my trusters, client 3. You know what I mean? Like I just ran first 2 buys, and I'd be third. So if they rejected it, let's say it was a 30 grand under deal, they reject two rejections, no worries, just send me the contract and I'll do it from that end.
Okay.
That's how I was still buying, when I was still buying in Brizzy at that time frame.
Yep.
That was what they were, or they were the big renovation deals.
So we're getting close to the 30 mark. We've got 4
that's
more.
26. Number 27. And this kind of is a double, but I'm only running it as a single. This was probably the one that I kind of had a bit of exposure on, that I had the biggest issue with out of almost all deals. This actually ended up being a knockdown rebuild. So I had my builders go through. I bought this one and next door together. So I bought number 8, 10, and 12. But 8 and 10 were the same block. House was absolutely stuffed. And then number 12, to buy 12, I had to buy 8 to 10 as well, because I knew they were going to struggle to sell 8 to 10. And number 12 was in pretty good nick. So
In Brizzy?
in Brizzy, yes. This was in Kingston again. Paid $250 for 8 to 10. Pretty much market land value. Actually, it was kind of less than land value at the time. Had my builders go through. We were sure that we could salvage it. They went right through it, man. Like we did everything. We did invasives. We checked everything out. By the time we actually went through to do the deal, the renovation costs blew out so much. They're like, you'd be better off knocking this over and rebuilding, because it's going to cost the same, if not more, and it could still have problems. So funny story around that one. I had a client, Craig, who he's an international pilot. He's a champion, absolutely lovely bloke. Bought a fair few deals for him, and he moved back from he was working for Emirates over there, and he flew back and he bought himself a primary residence. It was going to be a knockdown rebuild. And there was this old Queenslander on it. And he called me out of the blue one day, like a week after. Talk about opportunities, right? Like a week after I got the phone call that this thing had to be dozed. And he goes, mate, I've got this old Queenslander. He goes, I've got someone that's like, they're gonna come and take some house removal company. They're gonna give me 10 grand, and then they'll just remove it and go sell it to somewhere else. And I'm like, yeah, sweet, man. Like, I'll 100%, let's do it. I thought, here we go, opportunity side of things. Because I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. Actually, it'd probably been a few months since I've been told that this thing was stuffed.
Yep.
And I was trying to figure out what to do with it. I go, you know what? Like, that's actually not a bad idea. We also knew that we could subdivide it. But I was tossing up between holding it as a cash flow deal and just building a granny on it and fully renovating it. And that was a game plan. That was the best return from a cash flow perspective. When it came in that I had to knock it over, then I was running the numbers, I had to change my strategy, like all these different things. And there's too much going on for me to really think about this. And in the end, man, like it kind of worked in so fortuitously. Cost blew out a little bit on the house removal side of things. Again, why I wouldn't give a deal like this to a client. But yeah, man, ended up, we've dozed it. We did the Queensland house removal, the house removal of the old Queenslander, dropped it on the site, ended up subdividing it. And I'm going to build another house, like a brand new, like 4-bed, 2-bath, double garage home on the other one. And I'm just going to sell them both. So that was supposed to be a cash flow deal. Ended up turning into like a small development site, dev play on that thing as well. I don't have the exact numbers on what it would be now and what it would be when I fully complete the thing, because I haven't finished the project yet. The market's still moving, et cetera, et cetera. So again, a deal that could have turned really, really bad. And at the end of the day, man, it's just like, it is what it is. I had to face up. This is why deals like this I don't give to clients. But yeah, man, at the end of the day, I'll make good money off it once I finish the whole project, subdivided it, sell both sides, and that is the game plan for that site. The cool thing is number 12, the next door that I bought, really, really good deal. Over 800 square meters, high set home, right at the front of the block, great access down the back. Had a heap of palm trees and stuff to remove from it. I think I removed like 20 palm trees. And there was all these termite nests in all of them. Hence why the house next door was absolutely stuffed, the one that I had to remove, because the number 12 had all the barrier protection. This other one didn't. So yeah, man, knocked those things out, removed all the termite nests, and then built the granny out the back of that. Same reconfigured floor plan that I really liked on that. I paid $310 for it. All in, I was all in for just under $450K once I did the build out the back as well. That thing rents for over $1,100 a week. That's my highest net returning deal out of this whole tranche of deals. Gross yield on it at 13.5%. And yeah, that'd be worth over $1 million. 580K on my numbers in terms of equity.
It's incredible that you had to adapt and change, but to just have the foresight to see what is possible and to be nimble enough to adapt and change. That shows when you're at the top of your game. Right? I love that. That's awesome. That's stacking. You talk about stacking the deck. This is the ultimate stacking the deck strategy.
100%, man. I think the biggest thing to note here is that, like, in all reality, man, things can go wrong. Things did go wrong. Solutions-based thinking. How do we find a solution to the problem?
Yep.
And again, this is why an average investor wouldn't take this on. I had the kitty there, man. I had the cash flow. Everything there was okay to carry that if the worst did happen. The worst did happen. And you look at other deals like the one in WA at 230 with the 20 grand reno. The best case result came out. Yeah. Best case came out with that. With this one, it didn't. And that's, man, it's just as simple as it is. And it is what it is, man. And thankfully, solutions-based thinking found a way around this thing. And even if I wasn't able to subdivide and build again, even if I just had to knock it over and do the house removal on it as well, I still would have made money on it. I might not have made a huge amount, but the timing of the market and what I paid for it, like $250K I paid for that, right? It still paid off, man. It's still going to make me money from that front, but insulation via correct market selection too.
Perfect. Yeah, I like that. That's a good one.
Mate, we've got 2 deals to wrap up. Deal number 29, man, went back over to WA. Again, this was a renovator style home. We had 2 clients reject it. 4x2 in Parmelia, man. Bread and butter deal. Had the ability for a granny out the back. But man, I didn't rate it enough from that perspective. It was too close. It could have been done, and I kind of bought it thinking that I would. A lot of the cash flow deals, the future granny deals that I bought that I thought I was going to go and do this in, I changed my mind on it. I go, nah, you know what? A lot of them I've actually converted back to bread and butter deals, specifically because a lot of them when I didn't build, WA in particular had a massive build price increase.
Yeah.
That first deal I built for 170. That same build now is about 270. So the return would massively dip off. And I know for the difference, man, of me selling that and then putting that now into, say, like a commercial deal, or the result that I know that I'm going to get, far, far superior. So paid $280 for that, 4-bed, 2-bath garage. There was some structural issues with some patios and different things like that we had to effectively rip some of it down, rebuild some of it. All in, I was in for about $30K. It was a cosmetic spruce on the inside, but then the outside had to do some work. So all in at 310 grand. It currently rents for just under $600 a week, which is just under a 10% gross yield on a bread and butter. It's pretty good.
Perfect.
And that deal would be worth about $650 to $700K. So it's more than doubled in that time frame as well. Final deal just around the corner from Parmelia. I bought a little deal in that next suburb over as well. The cool thing about this, man, was it was an old 3-bedroom fibro house on it, and it had this old it was like this new. It was like this double-story barn-style granny flat thing that they'd built on it. 2-bed, 1-bath. Like, it was kind of
perfect.
Weird. Yeah, it was kind of weird, but it was kind of cool, actually. And I remember I went and visited it. I'm like, this thing's actually pretty sick. When we priced it up to rent them separately versus renting them together, it'd be a little bit different now, but I've had the same tenant in there since I bought it. So I paid 330 grand for this deal. It rents combined for 680. And at the time, I could have only rented a granny for 250 and the house for maybe 3 to 350. It's like 550 all up. And at the time, I could have rented both together to one extended family for the same money. Now, whilst I could probably rent them more separately now than what I could originally, I've had that same tenant in there. I have no issues with it. It's sweet. It does its thing. It's a 10 and it's almost 11% yield on that front. The property's doubled. I don't need to go and worry about trying to get an extra $100 a week rent to do that, which is like also double the exposure. I've got one tenant in there that looks after it well. I probably, as a net result, will actually lose more by moving them out, having a vacant period, renting them separately. I'd have to fence it out. I have to separately meter it and all the rest of it. It just works like that, man. And yeah, dude, it's good. And the cool thing is when I went through and did all these deals, and if you go through the creative lending module in School of Property, you'll understand how I, from a financing perspective, got through it all. But man, the first 4 all came from that equity that I pulled out at pretty hectic rates. The next 4 came from that big equity. The next 4 to 5 probably came from that big equity release that I did out of what do you call it? The bill finally was completed, refinanced away from the shark money. And then the final 2 to 3 deals, I actually went back to the existing stuff that I bought with that lower tier money. They were still happy to lend to me. So I actually pulled a bit more out from those and then used those use that because I'd made the money. We'd have uplift in the last 6 to 12 months or 6 to 9 months since I bought those first little bunch of deals there. And then yeah, man, that effectively gave me the equity to knock those last few out. So pretty much all of that cash, I might have thrown in a bit of my own cash. Obviously, yep. I was making a little bit in the biz at the time finally, and I live very, very frugally. But that would have given me the position, man. I pretty much did all of that, man, off equity releases, all off equity, 11 deals during like a 9-month window in the heart of COVID. Yeah, man. And to do a recap on it, I didn't actually work out. Actually, I might be able to work this out real quick now if I add
I was going to
these all
ask you
together.
what the val.
Total purchase price of everything on the way in that period. Man, this is actually going to blow your mind. I didn't even realize this.
This is just the 10 deals, or is this the
total cost? One sec. I'll throw this in. Sorry, guys. Bear with me for 1 second. So all in the 11 deals, right? Property 20 through to 30. Now, you may think that's 20, but obviously 20 to 29 is actually the 10 deals. 30 making it 11 deals total. I was all in, including grannies, purchase, granny builds, renos, and all that sort of stuff. I was all in for a little bit over. I'd probably be going closest to 4.5 mil. Sorry, guys, I didn't work out exactly what that was, but I was all in for around about 4.5 mil, 4 to 4.5 million, somewhere in there. My total net equity gain from then until now, just those 11 properties, is 5.8 million. So for anyone that tells me I'm not going to pay, or I'm not willing to pay that extra bit to get that money, I'm not willing to do these things outside the box, roll the dice, all the rest of the sort of thing, that's fine if your risk profile doesn't say it. And if your goals aren't massive. If your goals are massive, I've done more than 100% equity. It probably would be like 130, 140% equity on those deals that I bought during that window when everyone said not to buy, all the media said not to buy. I had to take shark money. I had to take the lowest tiers of lending, scraping the barrel for every dollar that I could put together to do this thing. And I've always said those deals, I've never actually worked it out, what those deals that I bought. I always said I bought $3 to $4 million worth of deals. Yeah, man, it was 5.8 million off those 11 deals in say 4 years.
Now, I know we're going to wrap up soon,
Yes.
but I just want a question for you. Because for people listening thinking, well, Sammy, that was back then and prices were really cheap and so forth. And yes, you've done exceptionally well. And we know the decisions that you had to make during that time. But for people that are buying today,
I also
in this
did
market,
accelerated plays there.
You
That's
did.
the other
You
thing to
did.
throw into the equation.
Yeah, you did.
I did builds, I did renos, I took on projects that most people wouldn't go anywhere near
Stack
or
the
touch.
deck.
100%, man.
Yeah.
Stack the deck.
But for people starting out now, at the price point that we're buying at, well, let's say we're looking at minimums 4s to 5s to get into the market.
Yeah.
If we look ahead in the next 3 to 5 years, could people achieve a similar outcome?
So the biggest thing to remember is the accelerated plays that I did during that window gave me a massive leg up. And the one thing that I just realized I didn't throw in there, I kind of threw in the net amount of that double block. I didn't throw in the build on top. Call it around 4.5 mil, probably even a little bit more to net. 5.8 mil, right? The biggest thing to remember is to make 300 grand on a 300 grand property is the property doubling, right?
Yep.
To make 300 grand on a $600,000 asset is 50% growth. Right now, you have a pretty decent chance in the next 5 years of buying a high quality asset at $500,000 to $600,000 and seeing it increase by 300 grand. It is nowhere near as much of an increase in terms of a percentage versus a 300. Now, if you ask, well, what's easier, a 300 grand property to double or a 600 grand property to double? I agree. It's easier for a 300 grand property to double. It's twice as much, right? For the 600 to double. But if you threw it into the equation of a 600 grand deal doing 300 or a 600 grand deal doing 400 versus a 3 doing 400, you're more likely to get that higher priced asset to do that higher amount of growth from an actual dollar perspective. And man, this is where you always need to change. You need to be fluid with a strategy. And if a strategy needs to change to emulate the current market conditions, then man, that is what it is. And if that's what you need to do, man, then that's what you need to do. And we have to always play the hand we've dealt. I've been talking about this for the last 12 to 24 months. That you have to play the hand you dealt. And we can't, no one can rewind because everyone would say, oh yeah, man, I'd go back and buy all those. But no one was doing that. Everyone was too scared, or they couldn't get the money, or they were too scared, or they could get the money, but they weren't willing to pay the rate. Everyone looks at that figure and goes, man, that's crazy. It's like, yeah, man, but half of these deals were crazy to take on. And then for me to borrow the money and get the money I was getting at was also crazy to take on. So, man, I think to really nip this in the bud and talk about this as a final point, man, what are you willing to roll? What are you willing to do to get results like this? Most people wouldn't say at the same level, but could you go out there and buy 10 deals over the next 3 years, and man, each of those deals being $500,000 to $600,000 and getting $300,000 to $400,000 worth of growth of them in the next 5 years? Because remember, this is 4 to 5 years of an aggressive strategy play during a very aggressive buying window, buying at that time frame as well. Is that achievable? 300 to 400 grand growth on 10 properties per property, finished acquisition through to growth rate to be finished? Yes, 100%. Doesn't need to be the crazy level that mine obviously got to, but they also don't need to do the crazy strategy that I did to get there as well.
Correct.
And fully roll the dice. But do you think most people would be happy with a $3 to $4 million
100%.
game?
What's the
in a 5,
opportunity
6, 7?
cost?
Man, and this is the thing. And what people have got to remember is that stuff that they're buying right now and that we're, recommending and putting on the table and everything is the same stuff that I'm buying now. Because, I might buy the shitbox version of it, right? And do it up. But this is the reality of today's market, that these are the sort of deals you have to get into. And if anything, man, less headaches. Like, can you imagine how many people would be stressed out of their mind with half the stuff that I put into that portfolio? And man, I think this is one of the things, man, where I really want to nail this thing and finish it off with, mate, is you've always got to look at what something's going to make you or what's going to cost you.
Yeah.
Don't compare yourself to a scenario from 3, 5, 10, 20 years ago, because otherwise we will all go crazy. Hindsight is a beautiful thing. You just got to look at what are you dealing with now? What can we maximize now? And what position can you get yourself in? Because, mate, every day of the week, if I did 10 deals and within 5 years of those 10 deals being purchased, I could make $3 million on those, I would be absolutely ecstatic.
Yeah.
And that is what you got to look at, man.
Yeah. I had a call with a guy the other day and he said, are you sure now is still a good time? I said, well, let me ask you this. Do you think in 5 years' time, someone who's starting out will do well in property? Or 10 years' time? Or 20 years' time? Will someone who is just born today, turns in 20 years, starts investing, do you think they'll do well? Of course they will. Everyone's going to have a chance to do it, but would you prefer to have started now as opposed to 5, 10, 20 years? You can only deal with the cards you dealt with. You said it really well.
Man, there's markets this year that'll do 100, 150, 200 grand's worth of growth this year. This year. I guarantee you, man. I know it 100%. So it's always a good time to invest. You just have to be intelligent with where you go and put your money. And man, I love that we get to help people do this as well. So,
Sammy, what a journey. You had me at the edge of my seat. That was a wild ride. That's 9 months. And that is growing the business.
yeah, there was a lot going on, man.
That's doing a lot of
There's a lot
things.
going on.
Gosh.
Hats off to Morgs for being able to deal with me during that period
You
of
know
time,
what?
man, that crazy period
it
of
was
time.
nice to hear you say that because, you couldn't do it on your own and you can tell someone's character when they stick by. It's easier to drink champagne when everyone's celebrating, but to dig deep when things aren't going well, that's a true test to someone. So big hats off to Morgs.
Likewise, man. Likewise. I agree with you completely, brother. Guys, I hope you took some great value out of that episode. I hope we didn't rip through it too quick. I hope you actually enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed the speed that we ripped through it as well. And if you think anyone would enjoy this episode and take some value from this episode, please send it on. I know the first half an hour was pretty hectic. We got a little bit heated. We got a little bit fired up, as Jimmy and I typically like to do. But yeah, I hope you took some great value. If you did, send it on to someone else you think would also bloody enjoy the episode. If you haven't left us a 5-star review yet, guys, please make sure you jump onto your favorite listening platform. You give us that 5-star review. If you haven't, hit the follow or subscribe button. Hit the follow or subscribe button. It shows us that you love the different episodes and that we're bringing the right stuff to you. If you haven't gone and tuned in to the Top 1% podcast yet, make sure you get over there, you tune in. My episode's number 1. Big Jimmy's sitting at number 5 episode, I think, like just in terms of release time. So guys, make sure you go and check that out. There's a lot of really, really cool stories over there of some hyper successful people. I know you'll take some great value. But until next week, guys, that's a wrap. Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on, joining me as always for a portfolio breakdown, my friend. And until next week, guys, we'll catch you again for another Scouting Australia podcast.